when I sent him the questions last week. I didn't hear from him, so I was wondering if he was gonna see them, but he said he saw it. He's ready. All right, I didn't hear back from him yet, but he said we'll see you in Discord. So let me go check around Discord and see if I see him. All right. We're doing okay. Yeah. There's a little bit of an echo in the background there, Zen, but I was telling you earlier, and thank you to everyone who has been praying for our friend Mel. She had a kidney transplant last week, and we just picked her up at the hospital today, brought her home. But she's like so healed. We couldn't even tell she had surgery. It's amazing. But yeah, I know a lot of people. The surgery was on Friday, and then she's had a few days to recover. And I've been going to the hospital every day just to have some education for caregivers. They went over her diet, her medications, all that stuff. So yeah, and it looks like we have a lot of people in the chat already. Hey, good to see you, Brick, Tammy, Adrian, Living, Yahushua, Yahuwah, Donna. Great to see all you guys. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Right on. Yeah, it's so cool. No, I was just gonna repeat what you said. Yes, it's so great to have everyone join us and like a little community or a family here online. And even though we're so far apart, we're definitely close when we're here online. I feel like I'm closer to a lot of people here in the chat and you, Zen, than I am to a lot of my friends that actually live here on the island. Because we're set up to meet at least twice a week, get together here online, and it's a really cool fellowship. So if anyone's listening who has not joined us yet at Digital Readers Club, I would highly recommend you do that if you'd like to be introduced to biblicals. You get to hear Zen's commentary after we read, and that's every Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And currently we're going through the Legends of the Jew. Oh yeah, for sure. And Zen, I'm not sure. In my mic, I still hear kind of an echo in the background after I'm speaking. I was wondering if there's anything I just feel like I'm hearing myself speak 2 times, but not for you. Okay, okay, that's because I don't hear it when you. Okay, good, because I'm not here. I don't hear. I'm not sure. Let me go and check. Hold on. I'll be right back. Let me see if I can move my volume around here or something. And we're still looking for Brother Gary to come in. Okay, cool. Hmm. Okay. Gary, if you're listening, go into Discord and look for Studio B. The link should take you there. And when you get in there, you should look on the left side. You should be able to see the chat of who's in the room. You'll see Zen and me in there. But for everyone else, if you guys have questions for Gary, this is our monthly Ask Me Anything, and we are taking questions in the chat. So if you have anything that you would like to ask Brother Gary, please put it in all capital letters, and I am retrieving the questions from the chat as well. And we appreciate everyone who sent. There's a lot of questions last time. We'll see if Gary will make it through all these today. And you could also send it to his email. If you want to email me the questions directly, you can send it to biblicalhebrewhawaii@gmail.com. And then we have our monthly Ask Me Anything the first Wednesday of every month. So the questions we receive between now and the end of this month will be asked to Gary at the first week of August. So that's that. Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. Oh, good to see you. Okay. All right. I'll be right back then. So then you'll be emailing it to him, the updated link? Okay. There. I just sent him a message about it. There we go. So let's see who else we got. We have Flat Out Truth. Good to see you guys. Sharon, great to see you, sister. Tammy, thank you so much to all of our moderators. 3L Koyo, I see your question, 3L Koyo. I'm going to take note of that right now and add it to my list here. You guys always ask such high-level questions. I'm always so impressed when I read through the questions. I'm like, oh my goodness, how did they even think to ask that? It's amazing. It's really good to read through the questions you guys submit every month. I know, it was such a good setup with Skype. All right, 3L Koyo, I got you. Right on. Okay. Right on. Good to see you, Shay, Michelle, Moonlight, Leonard. You guys are, yeah. Yeah, Gary should be in here pretty soon. Gary's been super busy too. I think a lot of the listeners here, yeah, a lot of the listeners along with myself, yeah, we've been listening to his interviews with Taylor Welch. I've been listening to his latest ones. If you guys haven't checked those out, he's done several in the past month. Or I think he actually traveled to Tennessee to do the interview in person, and they recorded it there. Yeah, yeah. So he really has a lot of information about the royal bloodlines, which I appreciate so much. He's actually traced the bloodlines from the current kings and rulers of Earth today, such as like King Charles, all the way back to the particular fallen angel who is their ancestor that they worship. I just thought that was amazing. Yeah, like he went from King Charles back to Vlad the Impaler, which we know that one, and then Vlad was the descendant of Hercules. Hercules was the descendant of Hasdeha, the fallen angel represented in the book of Enoch that was in charge of all the smitings of the womb, like to cause early abortion for children. So that's King Charles' ancestor. I was like so blown away when Gary was telling us all that. That was cool. Oh, and Leonard said Gary discussed with Dr. Pigeon on Tuesday. Wow. Yeah, that's really cool. I like it when the community all comes together. That's really neat. And yeah, so you guys have heard of Taylor Welch in the chat. I see some of you have listened to those also. They're just really well recorded and it's okay. All right. So while Zen is bringing Gary in, I'm going to do my little introduction spiel. All right. Okay, cool. Welcome everyone to another Ask Me Anything monthly session with researcher, speaker, and author Gary Wayne. This is your host, Lisa George. We've received a bunch of questions during last month's show that Gary will be answering today. If you have a question for Gary, please join the live chat and put it in all caps so that we can see them. I'll be retrieving your questions in the live chat, and I don't want to miss any, so please put them in all capital letters. And we just thank you so much to our moderators for helping me see the questions. If you don't see that I've commented that I got your question, then please alert me. That would be great. So as soon as we bring Brother Gary in, we'll be asking him what's been going on with him, besides all these numerous interviews he's doing and with so many different channels. I think he said for a while he was doing 6 or 7 interviews every week, which is just crazy. I don't know how in the world he can keep up with all that. But we know the brothers can talk. He has a lot of information to share and just a lot of good insights. And then if you have any questions on any of his material, you can always go to his website, and he has manuscripts written on other topics besides what are in his 2 books, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy and The Genesis 6 Conspiracy 2. You can find both of those on Amazon. He's got quite a lot of other links where you can find him. He's on Facebook. He has a Facebook group there with several moderators in the Facebook group also, where you can read his information he's posting there. We usually put up upcoming shows there. Like I'll be putting the link to this show in there after we're done today. And so if you missed the beginning of this, you can always go back and listen, which I've re-listened to some several times just to make sure I get all the information. And Sharon, is there a strange noise? To me, it sounds it's kind of like a little echo in the background. Sharon, maybe you can tell me what type of strange noise you're hearing. And Living, yes, I see. Okay. Oh, yes, I got your email. Living, thank you so much for forwarding that to me. I will be responding as soon as possible. Thank you. And yes, it's only me talking right now. Oh, there's Brother Gary. Hey, Brother Gary, I just did your whole and I introduced you, Gary, with your book information. Can you tell the listeners, Brother Gary, first, how are you doing, and where else can we find links to purchase your book?
Yeah, so my apologies for being late with the new system. I'm also getting a lot of feedback right now.
Yeah, I am too. I'm not
So I'll try and yeah.
maybe Zen, try to mute your mic then, and let's see if that helps, because it sounds like it's feedback maybe from something with your microphone, maybe? Okay. There. Okay. Oh, that's better. Okay, good. There's no feedback. Gary, do you hear any feedback now? If you can try saying something, please.
Yeah, no feedback at all right now. So that's much better. So my apologies for being late. But I had downloaded the app and I was a member, but it would not connect to the link. So then I had to re-register and then set everything up again. So learning curve.
Yeah, it's hard with these new servers we're using. There's always like a different way to navigate about them, but I'm so glad that feedback is gone now. And I gave your whole introduction already, Gary, so we can just dive right into the questions. But I first wanted to check in with you, see how everything's going. I was telling the listeners that I've been enjoying your interviews with Taylor Welch lately. You did some really long but information packed interviews with them. And you traveled to Tennessee as well, right, for the interviews?
I did, and just like with the first two that I did with them, I said, I'm coming a long ways. Maybe we should do two. They said, no, we'll do one. And after the first show in both, we have to do another one. So we stayed in the afternoon and did another one, changed shirts, and away we went. So yeah, it's been and the shows have been received pretty darn well out there. So pretty happy with that, and happy to be working with them and be working with them on a project in the fall on a curriculum type format on some topics. So, and we'll hopefully be down there in the fall to record those ones as well.
Great. Oh my goodness. I was sharing with everyone. I really, especially, one of my questions I asked you today in the list of questions I sent you will cover this topic. So I don't want to have a spoiler alert for that, but we'll wait till we get to that question. But I just really appreciate the information. And I'm sure that those two guys did too. They just seem so blown away by every time you spoke. And it sounds like you're probably doing interviews with them most of the time you were there, even if they weren't recorded, because they said that they were asking you questions quite a bit, like in the car. I think I heard Taylor say driving to Chipotle or something.
Yes. Yes, so we broke for lunch, and I went with Taylor, and we continued to talk, and he's just kind of going, what? So
it's been fun though. It's so much fun when you have information and the people have no clue about any of it before, and then you're able to share that. That must have been a fun experience.
It was, and to be able to connect a lot of dots for an audience who wasn't all that familiar with me in January. So, yeah, very, very happy to be able to have done that, and hopefully we'll continue working with them.
Oh, that's so great. That's awesome, Gary. Well, I think without further ado, we should get into the questions. So again, for everyone in the chat, if you do have a question for Gary, please put it in all capital letters so I can retrieve that. And we'll start with, we have quite a list of questions to go through today. So we'll start out with the first one from David Polachek. He's asking, based on the finds of David Rawl, how does your research explain his theory of the Egyptian kings, including Moses being right alongside Akhenaten and Lucius?
Yeah, so I think when I look at Rawls' work, I think he's done some terrific work. And what David is referring to is he believes that there's a 400-year differentiation in the biblical and secular record that's based on counting dynasties twice. And so believe that there is in two Egyptian dynasties because they had different names, multiple names, and most people don't realize that. So, for example, and you can't go through all of them because some of them have up to 7 names, but in book 1, I talk about Akhenaten, but that was also known as Amenhotep IV. So you have to be careful with that, you're not, as you're looking at the history, you're not double counting the dynasties. So he sort of puts that with the Exodus, somewhere around around the 1400s or so, and we're still from where my chronology is off. With him is a little bit more because I'm working, and I'll be covering this in detail in book 3. I am working with the data points in the Bible, and in terms of the time of the Exodus. And I will push that back to about 1490 for the Exodus, and the 40 year of the sojourning starting about 1530. And I've got all the data points that drives people crazy matched up, in terms of being able to work back from the flood, using the information about Abraham, using the information that is recorded downstream in the time of Solomon, and making sure that we have a nexus point that hits the same sort of date. And in that, there's a little bit of terminology clarification that I'll go through to show people why they're getting hung up on finding a mismatch on a consensus date. So I would push it back a little bit further, and not necessarily with his chronology through the chronology of his kings, but maybe a little bit further back in terms of some of the Sumerian kings and things that are before the flood, and we get a couple of 100 years there as well. And it's very much akin, my numbers are very much akin to what differs between the Masoretic text and the Septuagint of 600 years. And so when and I did a couple shows in Greece, and they were having really difficult time with the 400 to 600 year pushing forward of the dates. So when they get into like the Trojan War and things like that, it doesn't line up with their history. And I said, well, what happens if you move it back 600 years? He says, well, that even would move Hercules back to about 23 to 2400 BC. I said, well, that makes sense because he would be one of the first sons of Zeus reigning after the flood. And they said, well, it would just clear everything up, but how did you get there? And so I won't go through all of that, but there's still a lot to be learned from the Bible and its accuracy. But sometimes we really have to dig into it and not rely as much on the secular understanding of when the dating is. And so Akhenaten, I don't place at the time of the Exodus of 1490. And I know for people who might be double checking, I would say circa 1400 to 1450. And that's kind of the best I could sort of get it to, and lining up the data points until I found the key to be able to make them mesh. So 1490 is what I'm sort of working with at this sort of perspective and a more specific date. And it happens after the Santorini explosion, driving the Philistines out of Crete and expropriating the land of the covenant, which puts them in place for the time of the Exodus, and the Israelites avoid doing war with the Philistines at that point in time. So everything sort of starts to come together. Now, as that pertains to Akhenaten, I would disagree with placing Akhenaten with the Exodus. In fact, I would look at his reign and as the consequence of what happens to a previous pharaoh, and with his introduction of with Akhenaten's introduction of Aten versus Amen, which was the other part of his title, because they always would put their god in their title, and that shows a move away from the old gods of the Amun pantheon and raising one of those ones up of the pantheon, Aten, to the highest level. So understanding that, then it sort of brings back in if he wants to place Akhenaten at somewhere between 1250 to 1350 after the Exodus, I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. I would just have a different way of getting there.
Okay. Wow. I am really bad with Egyptian history, so I really appreciate all of your input on that, Gary. Thank you so much for that. Next question is from Dale Stevenson. He's asking, where do leprechauns originate?
It's a really good question. And I would also say it's important to understand that from the larger context of the leprechauns and the groups of people that they belong from is the biblical sort of relationship with the leprechauns, not specifically the leprechauns, but I'll explain that a little bit more. So leprechauns are part of a group called elementals, and they are a trickster spirit. They are mischievous. They're not a trickster god, but they're a lower level of being. And they would be the Shadim that the mysticals look at as a lower level creation of the gods, in terms of the visible hierarchy than what the Nephilim were created at. There's 4 groups of elementals. There are the large ones, which are higher than the little ones. And so the 4th group is the salamander grouping of reptilians, which are typically depicted as a little bit larger than humans, living in other dimensions or living in the earth. And then you have 3 groups of small people or little people. And whatever you do, do not put the white elves into any of these groups because they are large. They are actually allegory for the giants versus the dark elves, which are the little ones. And I'll explain that a little bit more. So the 3 groups are, one is called the little people, which are good looking. So we would have neroids, sprites, mermaids, nymphs, light elves, sylphs, light small elves, not white elves, different sylphs, and in the First Nations, there's a few different names. A common one would be dogwood. Then you have the ugly ones, which are like the dwarves, the goblins, the hobbits, the trolls, the dark elves, and the gnomes. And and all of these different groups of beings, they have a specific task or agenda or a role in the visible hierarchy of old as they worked for the demigod giants. So, for example, the dwarves would work in the earth, generally in the mountain areas in the earth, and create the weapons of the demigods. And you see that as they're depicted in Lord of the Rings. So, a couple of data points on that. So now we get to the mischievous ones, the trickster spirits. And again, they are quite small as well. Probably maybe even a little bit smaller than the ugly ones, just as the little ones might be a little bit bigger than the ugly ones for the most parts. So these are going to include the Menohe, which you'll appreciate, Lisa.
Yes, many
If I
huni.
pronounce that right, Menohe, yeah.
Many huni.
Minahuni, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
The imps, the brownies, the pixies, and the leprechauns, to name a few. And they're the laurel people in the First Nations group. And the ugly ones would be the rock people in the First Nations group. These are standard groups of little people all over the world. All 4 groups of 3, and then the additional one. And they're associated with the elements of the world, like earth, wind, fire, water, and each one represents one of those elements from where the name elemental comes from, that all 4 are called. And so when we look at the history of the leprechauns now, understand they're coming from the mischievous ones, obviously associated with the pot of gold and the pot of knowledge and stuff like that. So if we look at it from, I'm going to look at it from two different cultures and show you how they kind of intersect on this. So in the Irish tradition of the leprechaun, which most people would be more familiar with, they're called Loch Cromain, and they're from the Celtic god somehow, some way, or associated with the god Lugh and water sprites that come out of the little people, the good-looking ones. So it seems to be um, very interesting creation between the sprites and the Celtic god Lugh, and they have a small body in Irish, so part of the smaller ones. And but again, we have and I find it really good policy to look at the Roman or the Etruscan ancient pantheon from this. And in their version from the Roman gods and from the Etruscans, and the priests of Phanos, or the goat gods, like a pan god, or Cern, as he would be named in the Etruscan pantheon, Cern, also can be spelled Kern if you want to pronounce them both. Kern, one Cern, one Kern. I've heard it every different way. And yes, it's the same acronym for that mysterious interdimensional facility that's over in Switzerland. So,
Yeah, that's what's
and
so
so,
ironic. That's like so ironic. It's the same thing.
yeah, yeah. So the leprechauns have an association with the Roman gods, and understand that Diana, which would be equivalent to Morgana, or Morgan in Irish lore, and there's a few other different names as well for the mother goddess. Diana is the queen of fairies. So again, things start to make a whole lot of sense. Now, Odin is a horn god, so he's one of these satyr gods. And what's also interesting is that we have another god, not Lugh, but kind of associated with Lugh. But again, this one is a little bit off to the side, just as many of the pan gods, like Pan in the Greek pantheon, he's there, but where do you place him, right? He's not Zeus. And so I would put Cernunnos in that same category as one of those horn gods, and also known as Hern, by another transliteration in England. And so he would be known as in these beings would be known as Leucopan as well. So you could use the Loch Cromain for either the Roman for an etymological base and or the Irish, and then a crossover of just the Irish from Leucorpan, which is again connected to the setter gods, right? And Luperci is a celebration of the goat gods in Rome. So there's some weaving that's going around in this sort of etymology, but let's make sure that the common understanding would be is that these are a trickster spirit elemental created from the gods, and seemingly from another group of the elementals. And from what we're told in the research on it, it would be the water sprites. So interesting group of people for sure. So how does this connect back biblically? Well, in Galatians 4, 3, and 9, there's a passage in there, two passages in there that's associated with the fallen angels who rule over this world and enslave us in this world. And also as they connect in the elementals in Galatians 4, 3, and 9 as being those that enslave us in this world. Now, elemental goes back to the Greek word stoichion, and it can mean a basic element of the part of the universe, or it can be an element like wind or fire that the occult uses and where they get the name from, or it can also be some sort of being that's not really fully explained in the Bible as to who they are. And these are the elementals that are seemingly part of the visible hierarchy, along with the Nephilim, along with the larger elementals, the salamanders. And then we get a word in Colossians 2:8 and 20, again discussing the fallen angels, not worshiping the fallen angels, and again a reference of being enslaved by the rudiments. Well, that's the same as the elementals. The translators, you translate it from the same word, stoichian, so they weren't very consistent in that translation, which makes it confusing. But it's the same word, and it can only apply it to a basic element of the universe, which the Bible does refer to elements, and it's the same word, but not as beings that could enslave us. Has to be one of the two.
Wow, as you're rattling off all those different types, I kept just thinking Lord of the Rings, like the rock people, the dwarves, they included pretty much all of them, didn't they? All those different.
They did, and ones that I don't have on my short list. So,
Wow. Okay, well, thank you so much for that, Gary. The next question is also from Dale Stevenson. He's asking, where does the wizard's hat originate?
Yeah, so again, this is from two different sources. One would be more, I think, post-diluvian, and the other one would be antediluvian. But the first one, that's more post-diluvian, is carrying forward an antediluvian mythos, if I can put it that way. And for people who haven't heard me talk about prehistory, one of the ways that we can understand the events in prehistory as they come down to us from various cultures is before and after the flood. So if we understand that before the flood, the parent gods ruled, and if we're looking at the pantheons that have a better written record of that, we could use like Kronos as a parent god or Uranus as the parent god, because it's used, they're both used as a consort of Gaia, the mother goddess. Those would be parent gods before the flood. And then you'd have, like Zeus and Athena and Hera as being male and female gods after the flood that take over for the parent gods. So when Zeus reproduces Hercules, he's doing a second incursion. Not that Kronos didn't create giants, because he did. It's kind of like El, the parent god, and Baal, the offspring god. El created many giants, as the records show for the Canaanite history and pantheon in that Middle East area. To be, not to be too narrow on that focus. And Baal creates the Rephaim giants and the Baalim Council after the flood. So again, we have this consistency. So if we understand that, the first god I'm going to reference is Odin, the horn god, that is more related to a odd god out of place after the flood. But he's also known as the parent god, so he's been conflated into one, which is really sort of makes that confusing. But we also understand Baal would wear horns and be associated in a similar sort of way. So it may in fact be the pan god is the chief god after the flood, because you get all of these bit of inconsistencies in its kind of consistency in terms how it describes these horn gods, very important gods of the pantheon, sometimes a parent god, sometimes a chief god, and other times powerful, but nobody knows where to really place them. So as we look at Odin, that's where it becomes kind of clear, I would say. So with Odin, he's depicted with a hat. And this hat is not is wide brimmed. It's not always depicted as white. Sometimes it's depicted as black. So I don't know why you have two different, other than within polytheism you have white hats and dark hats. So it might be saying that Odin was more of a dark hat god than a white hat god. But you have this hat that's wide brimmed and kind of tall, and it's the same hat that you're going to see Gandalf wear in The Lord of the Rings. And Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings is antediluvian, but it's a white hat. That doesn't mean they couldn't show other priests with the dark hats, because there's the good and evil as they would play it within the polytheist aspect of it. And so he was the known as the Wanderer, and noted for his hat. And so, out of the Norse mythology that Tolkien is using, we get that. But there's that ancient history that I think he's more reflecting with the white hat. So when we look in the Atlantis tradition, we get that white hat. And then when we see in the Grail tales with King Arthur and Merlin, he's depicted with a white hat. And that's the allegories that are written into King Arthur, there's many, but in the one set of narratives, as King Arthur pulls Excalibur out of the stone, he is re-beginning the new Atlantis. So, and in the new Atlantis, you're going to have, just as you had before the flood and after the flood, you had priests that were assigned to the local giant ruler. We would see that coming and hiding from Christianity and oversight with the jester within the royal courts. That's how they got their polytheist priest there as an advisor, is to disguise them. So when we look at this white hat, right, starts to make some sense, right?
Yes.
And so the white hat is in that same sort of tradition of Enochian mysticism, Atlantean mysticism, and the original religion before the flood that would cross itself over into the flood after Babel, and probably the religion that Nimrod took on. So when we look at Baal and Pan, as we were talking about before, they're connected at Mount Hermon with the temples and the gateway to Hades and where the Baalim counts are located. So then you have some horned gods, and Baal also wore a horned hat. You also have this similar sort of horned god in understanding in the subcontinent of India with Rama, which was an avatara of Vishnu. So there's a subcontinent of Indian tradition with that would come through the Zoroastrian religion of the Eastern variety versus the Persian variety. So coalescing all of those things, it seems to go back to the various hats of the witches, and who will have black hats, which are similar, and they're priestesses, and warlocks or witches that would have similar hats, white or black as well. It's all in that sort of tradition, but it seems to have that tradition back to before the flood and with the original Enochian mysticism and Atlantean mysticism.
Oh, great. Yeah, I see in the chat here, Adrian saying the white hats, it sounds very familiar, kind of like Q type of language, which I don't think is an accident, because that's when you kept saying white hats over and over, it reminded me, wow, they're actually using that to refer to different people in the government even, which totally makes sense, right?
Yeah, and the Q is the K sound in Hebrew as we get it transliterated, and so Kabbalah would be spelled with a Q.
Ah, right. That's the connection. Oh, thank you for that, Gary. Okay, let's go to the next question. This one's also from Dale Stevenson. How is Jesus, and then in quotes, unremarkable in appearance according to the Bible?
Yeah, very, very good question. So I think the passages that Dale is referring to will come first out of Isaiah 52, about verse 14. And it's talking about the future Messiah there. So after Jesus becomes flesh, he takes a form, a physical form, and his face is marred more than others. So more than the others of the Adamites, marred in some sort of way. I'm not saying completely disfigured, but certainly not good looking.
Mm-hmm.
And so you look at the Hebrew word there, H4893, miskath, and it means disfiguring and disfiguring of the face. So how severe it was, I don't know, but it certainly wouldn't be one that people would be drawn to in a way that they would look sort of like in a leader, and I'll come back to that in a second. So Isaiah 53 is the other passage, verses 1 and 2. And it says he has no form of comeliness. That's Hebrew Hadar, which is interesting because Hadar is a transliteration as we see it that shows up in the Bible as Hadad. And Hadad is another name for Baal. And of course, the gods were looked upon as these shining, great, beautiful beings, even though they're of the pantheon. That's how they presented themselves. So he didn't have that sort of form, right? That's very, very interesting. And it's defined as magnificence, beauty, splendor, and majesty, and words like that. So he didn't have any form of that, and no form of that genealogical bloodline from the gods either. So he had no beauty. That's Mera in Hebrew, meaning handsome, spectacular, in appearance, fair, beautiful. And again, understand the giants were known as fair. The fairy queens, the mother queens were called fair. Fairy fair is a typical example that they would have blonde haired, blue eyes, red hair, hazel eyes, and some of the other ones jet black hair, like some of the ones that come out of more of the Mesopotamian region and Syrian region in terms of the offspring. So they were called fair, and they had very pale skin. So one deduces that he didn't have that fair skin. He may have more of the olive skin, that some of the um, Middle Eastern peoples are might be more associated with, or as we might more associate that with modern day Judah, more of that, not brown, but a little bit darker than the white of the European skin, so to speak. And that there was nothing that would cause people to desire him. And that's meaning to take delight in, to covet. Words like that, to idolize. And so I think this matches up very, very well with what Jesus called himself. He didn't call himself specifically the Son of God. He specifically tended to use the word Son of Man, Son of Adam, an Adamite. He didn't have that majestic glow to him, that different hair color and skin that was distinctive of the Indo-Aryan nobility ruling class, the giants. So he was completely different. And even from his marring, even less impressive from a Judean perspective of that time, which is really rather interesting. And that I don't think that he chose that Son of Man without a reason, that he did not want to be connected in any way to the genealogical demigod dragon counterfeit messiahs coming out of the celestial mafia godfathers. And I think that was done for a purpose. And the world at that time, and before even more so, were continually infatuated with the beauty of the gods and their offspring nobility. So Jesus was completely setting himself apart from that, because he was there for a special commission, and to start planting the seeds for the church and the resolution to the angelic rebellion. And that he was there to tell the world it's not the nobility that was going to inherit the earth, it's the meek. And he represented that in his humbleness and his poorness and everything that he did. So I think it's perfectly consistent.
Oh, I totally agree. Yes, that's such a great, thorough answer as usual from you. I think we have about 2 minutes until break. We can try to squeeze in one more question from Dale again. He's asking, was Moses' staff a serpent?
Well, it could certainly turn into a serpent. So we get first mention of the staff in Exodus 4:2 through 10. And, Moses is trying to figure out, how am I going to deal with the powerful people at the court, even though I've come from that. And one of the things that God does for Moses, he arms himself with a staff that God is transforming. This is a staff that he would have used while tending the sheep, right?
Right.
And would have received from Jethro or somebody who makes staffs for Jethro or his wife. And so it's probably that type of staff, and it's not a snake. And so when he goes to Egypt and the pharaohs who have snakes that they can paralyze, and with one sort of press of the thumb or finger, they can bring it to life, throw it on the ground. And Moses does the same thing with his staff. And everybody said, well, he had the same snake thing. And it just proved to be a more powerful snake because it's representing, the God of the Bible, the God Most High. I would take it up another notch. This was a sign from God given
All
to
right.
Moses. Signs of God.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're having a quick break. Their music is going on in the back, so let's hold that thought and we'll pick it
Oh, I
up
couldn't
again
hear it.
after break.
So, yeah.
That's okay. We'll see you in a few minutes.
As in the morning star. So it's interesting in the Greek mythology of the morning stars of Venus.